Hey everyone, I'm Lori Keating and this is Kidlit Meet and Greet. I'm here today with Rebecca Wenrich Wheeler, author of Whispering Through Water, When Daddy Shows Me the Sky, and When Mama Grows with Me. Welcome, Becca.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Can we get started by you telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure thing. I write both picture books and YA. I have my adult life have worked in the field of education for 20 plus years, which kind of scares me to say that. So I have been a classroom teacher, a school counselor. I have worked in specifically suicide and substance use prevention. And then currently, I work in school-based mental health. I have worked in schools in all sorts of different facets and with kids of all ages, K through 12. I was a school counselor specifically in elementary school, and I love third through fifth graders. They're my favorite of the bunch. Um, my husband's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, so we've got lots of those
Wow.
in our family. Um, I have two kids and two cats, which you will probably see at least one of them. She is right down there. Um, and I grew up in a very small town in Virginia, which is definitely a part of my life and my story. Like, how small is it? Um, it is a peninsula that's 6.6 square miles
Oh, wow.
with a total population of 3,000. So I graduated from a public high school with 37 students. So
Wow.
that was super normal to me until I came to North Carolina. My first classroom was at a very large urban high school in Raleigh. And I told my class, it was actually a creative writing class, I said, do you realize if you add 4 kids to this room, you'll have my entire graduating class? And mouths dropped. So I've been a city girl for the past 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so
And which do you prefer?
um, I like a little of both. I think I have if you're reading my books, you figure this out. I love gardening, so I try to have lots of plants. So even if I live in the city, I want to have lots of plants around me all the time. So, I mean, I think there's some good in both places. So
Sure.
I would say a little of both.
That's awesome. So, how did you get started writing for children?
Um, I and this is the truth. I've always wanted to be a writer. I never intended to become a teacher. I never intended to become a counselor. Um, the only thing I ever wanted to do was write books, and I think as a lot of people, I think a lot of artists can relate to this, whether you're a musician or a painter or whatever you are, you have to have a real job in order to to do
Right.
the job you really want to do.
Right.
So have two English degrees. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in English, and then I have a master's degree in counseling. So I originally went into school because I knew I like to write, I like to read. I knew I was good at research, and so that's what I went to school and somehow became a teacher, um, by accident. It was not my intention.
By accident.
Um, but and then I became a counselor later because I'm really interested in psychology and mental health, which definitely all informs my writing. So I kind of look at it that way, like all the jobs I've had,
Sure.
most definitely inform how I write and who I write for.
Okay.
Um, so I like When Daddy Shows Me the Sky, I actually wrote a mock-up of that book when I was in grad school, a very long time ago, like 2 decades ago, two and a half decades ago. If you look at my website, you can actually, I have pictures of the original storyboard.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
it didn't have the yoga in it yet because that came a little bit later. But so these stories have been in my head they've been with me for decades, like quite literally. So, um, it just takes time to come to come to fruition. But
So that's what I was going to ask you too. What came first? I guess picture books before the YA, or did you always have the YA work in as well?
Actually, well, probably the very first thing was poetry. That was the first thing I fell in love with doing. In college, I was published in a few poetry journals. Um, I was the Lit Mag editor. Poetry was a big end, but I think poetry is kind of the foundation for everything anyway,
Yeah.
because it teaches you some very specific things like how to use being exact with your wording, with metaphor and phrasing, and um all of those kinds of being able to paint a mental image in your head. I mean, it all really starts with poetry, and then yes, picture books, and then um, Whispering Through Water was my first YA that I ever wrote. I started it in 2008 and it was published in 2023. So that will tell you a little bit of span of time
Wow.
looking at that. So things can take a really long time, really
Sure.
long time. So um, but
Is
yeah,
that
so yeah,
because of research that you did or?
um, well, that's kind of an interesting story. It's
Oh,
a lot of my, I think a lot of my conversations began, I heard it on NPR, and that is also true with that story. I heard an interview on NPR of a book called The Girls Who Went Away. It was a case study book about girls who went away over the decades before Roe v. Wade from like 1945 to 1970. And I listened to this interview with this woman who did these case studies. I was just engrossed. I went and bought the book, read the book, and then um, that's what sparked the idea. And if you read the book, there's a specific timeline of events that have to occur. And the latest possible the protagonist could be was in the 90s. Like for it to line up with um, historical accuracy correctly, right?
okay.
So I started writing this in 2008, finished I thought it was a solid draft in 2013. I showed it to an editor. Her comment was, no one wants to read about the 90s.
Oh,
And so there's no way to bump it up. And I'd like really believed in the story. And funny thing, 10 years later, everybody wants to read about the 90s. I tease my
right.
daughter, who's almost 14. I think you look like I did in 1998. The clothes are the same. So, so I just sat on it. And then I revised it in 2021. I'm like, I'm gonna pull this thing out. And I restructured some of it. And there's some things happening in our political story in the United States too, and like everything just lined up. I said, I guess this was the time. I just needed to sit on it 10 years, and it works now. So I think that's sort of sometimes the moral of the story too, is like it might not be the right time. If you
Yeah.
think about it, I guess like 2013 to 1998 when the book was set maybe is a little too close,
Yeah.
but now it's far enough away that it's, I guess, historical fiction. I hate to say, because that's what
Yeah, right.
I was in school. um,
Well, that's
so
inspiring. And I think that
yeah,
will be just so many writers and authors. I mean, that's great that, I mean, you can sit on a manuscript and it's, what everybody's looking for at a different time.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So, what authors have inspired you along the way?
Um, so I really like growing up. I loved Anna Green Gables, Little Women. I was fascinated with Joan of Arc. You can kind of see Amelia Earhart. There's a theme to these women that
Right.
I read. Like, I really love those. I read Nancy Drew.
Hmm.
Again, I guess that goes in the theme too. Um, I read mostly always like more historical fiction, YA contemporary realm. I did love Alice in Wonderland, but like that's always kind of where I sort of landed with what I chose to read for myself. Um, in like current times, I really like Jordan Taylor is a YA author who writes historical fiction, two-person point of view historical fiction. Her book Paper Girl Paris is really awesome. So I like her. But I'm also adult lit. My favorite books were A Death in the Family by James Agee. That's one of my favorites. Like I always heavy Flannery O'Connor. So I think just like a variety
Sure.
of people, but it's always like very strong protagonist, kind of loner type of protagonist I like. Yeah, but I do like historical fiction. So,
Oh, that's super interesting. I love that. Okay, so where do your ideas come from for, well, I know like your picture books, they're yoga based, right? Okay. So,
Yeah, I mean, those are. I have some others in the works that are not necessarily, but I think just regular life.
sure.
There's so much, you know, there's just so much in everyday life that is fascinating. You just have to know where to look for it. And I that's with kids, like with the picture books in particular, I want them to explore their own backyard, like fascinating
Yes.
things. I love when my son loves bees and he loves to look for them, and I think that's fantastic. So, you know, even my older daughter still loves roly polies, and she will pick them
Yes.
up. So there's fascinating things in our own backyard, um, and that wonder is really important. So I think with all the picture books, like those are the kinds of things, and those natural things spark imagination. So
Yeah.
um, that's where that is. I mean, even for the YA, I like the stuff grounded in reality because there's still
Yeah.
so much wonder in just our natural world and be able to look for it. So
For sure. When you were talking about the bees, it just reminded me when my daughter was younger, my husband was a beekeeper, and she used to hold the bees on her fingers and say, "They're nice. They like me." And she wouldn't get stung. So I don't know. It's like little bee whisperer. And
yeah,
I just always found that so fascinating.
yeah. And that, when I do school visits with that book, one of the things I teach them, I said, if we see a bee, how should we react?
You're right.
And we need to stay calm because if we're calm, the bee stays calm. And
Yes.
so those are the because I love to take pictures of bees and I can get pretty close. I've never tried to hold one and I don't think I'm
Yeah.
not trying to do that. But I can get really close and as long as you're staying calm and your breath is calm, then the bee stays calm. Haven't been stung yet, but
Yes, absolutely.
so.
So, do you have a favorite spread that you want to show from your picture books, or
Let me
favorite line?
see. Hold on, they're right behind me.
Okay.
Can you give me a second?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So this is what, I don't know if you can see my frogs.
Aw, I
So
love frogs.
I love frogs, and I've learned a lot of people don't like frogs. So I try to teach like the
Really?
frogs are wonderful. So,
Yes.
um, but these two frogs, they come back to my back porch for 4 or 5 years, and by now it might be their children, but they come every year at about the same
Aw,
time. So the artist is Catherine Jordan. So she actually took photographs of the frogs. I sent her those. So those are my actual frogs
that's
on
wonderful.
the back, which I really love. Um, so I think so. This is the back page, and like this whole book. I mean, it is about gardening, it is about yoga, but it's also about learning patience and waiting. Um, And so, like, this is the very end. It says, just because we can't see them doesn't mean the plants aren't growing on the inside, Mama says. Just like people, I say, when we wait, we change on the inside. That's right, Mama whispers, waiting is growing. I smile because I know in all seasons, Mama grows with me. So the whole like idea, this is true for writers too, that flowers are dormant
Yeah,
half the year, right? I mean, so that we don't have to produce
constantly.
100% of the time to be valuable, and we don't have to produce 100% of the time to learn either. So like it talks about the biochemical process like of bulbs. I'm in North Carolina, so I usually actually wait till November to plant bulbs because it's not really cold enough till then, but you plant the bulbs when it's cold because there's a biochemical process that helps them prepare to bloom in the spring. So they are dormant for several months and they're supposed to be. So I think that's like people too. It's like we have to have times of dormancy, and that's okay because our
Yeah,
culture does not really like that,
yeah,
so anyway, but
yeah. That's
that's one.
wonderful.
So, but
So, how did you get into doing yoga?
Actually, I think teaching pushed me into teaching high
Okay.
school. I have been practicing yoga I was trying to think of when I saw the question. I guess it's been 25 years,
Oh, wow.
right?
Awesome.
Like 2000-ish.
Okay.
It's probably when I started. So I started my yoga teacher training in 2011. So my daughter was 1.
Okay.
It was my bucket list thing to do. So I finished my RYT 200 in 2012. And so I've been teaching for 13 years or
Wow.
so. So um, I have a very large age range. I've taught preschool, like down from 1.5,
Aw.
and my oldest guy I had was 98. So
Wow.
I really believe yoga is for every space body, that everybody has the capacity to do yoga. So it's not just about all those crazy postures you can Google. That's really not what yoga's about.
You're right.
Maybe the Americanized version sometimes I think, but it's really about body awareness and you know, so much of it's learning yourself and being able to control your mind, being able to concentrate on your breath.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel like that's helped you as a writer?
Oh yeah, I can't imagine my life now without it. So um it teaches you patience. I think it teaches you to pay attention, which is what writing you have to pay attention. Some of the
Absolutely.
best writers that I read, like they pay attention to their setting, they pay attention to facial expressions, and
Yeah.
if you can learn those things in your own body, then you can, you know, formulate that with characters too.
Yeah.
So I'll note it, like I'll if I'm writing like something, I'll think in my body, okay, what does that feel like in my body? And I make myself feel it and then write it down.
That's
Like,
awesome.
um, and then if you can learn to control that, it's pretty cool. But yeah, I can't imagine my life now without it. Um, so both
That's
my
good.
kids, my son, I taught a yoga class the night before he was born, and my daughter, I hadn't done my teacher training yet. So I took a class the night before she was born. I can
Yeah, it's
I can't
just you.
imagine not doing it. So it's just part of my
That's fantastic.
life.
So, what are some challenges you have as a writer and how do you deal with them?
I think one of the after I was published, I mean, honestly, the big challenge is just managing social media,
Sure.
marketing, because a lot of us were not salespeople,
Right.
and that's really not who.
Right?
And just being at that is so time consuming, and I think I know for myself, I have to no, you have to write because that's where you're doing this. Because if you don't write, then there's nothing else to publish anyway.
Right.
So to cut yourself off and to realize when you're getting too engrossed or you're comparing yourself too much to other people, you just have to stop it. I think that's been honestly the hardest thing since
Yeah.
is managing all of that.
Yeah. I agree. I think the marketing part, it's just never ending. That's what it is. And so I just
Correct.
realized I have to pick and choose like my battles. Like, okay, I can focus on this.
Yeah. I mean, you do over time learn what's more efficient use of your time and what's a waste of your time, but
Exactly. And when I decide something will not be beneficial, then I just don't do it because, or I'll do it later, when I have the time, when I'm
yeah,
not devoted to everything. So what's your favorite part about being a writer?
um, it's the act of writing. I love it. Like I forget who said this quote. It's the one thing when you're writing, you don't feel like you're supposed to be doing anything else. I,
Yes.
and I'll note like if there are times where work gets really busy and I go days without writing, it's like to me it's like exercise. Like I have to exercise as equally as much as I have to do this.
It's a part of
So
your yoga.
yeah, it's just a part of who you are. And even if it never sees the light of day, and
Sure.
I'm not somebody like, oh, I've got to do this X word count. I'm like, I'm gonna do a paragraph today, and that's cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Same. I'm the
so
same.
like and one day I might knock out thousands of words.
Right.
That's cool too. So I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
I'm not into all those schedules.
No, me either. It's
So
too much pressure.
like last night I did a paragraph and I was happy with that. Hit
Yeah.
save.
Good
Yeah,
for you.
but I have to do something because if I like put myself like you've got to write 10 pages and I only have 20 minutes, then guess what's not going to happen anyway.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes
So
sense.
um but yeah.
Okay.
But I'm like I have two kids and like I write most of my everything's written between 10 p.m. and midnight.
Oh, wow. You're a late writer. Okay.
Pretty much
Wow.
everything. If it's written, it's between about 10 p.m. and midnight. So
Wow. See, that's my wind down time. I don't think I could write anything at that point, but well.
yeah, I have to be wound down to write. So I kind of like that's
Okay.
it. So that's when I do it.
That's great. So any projects you're working on right now? Anything you're excited about?
So I do have a third. There I intended for this to be 3 books. So the third
Okay.
book is about grandma. So
Uh-huh.
I have that written. That one is set. I finished a draft of a second novel and I started working on a third one a few
Wow.
months ago. So I'm excited about that. Um, Playing around with that. I have a critique, a CBWI critique group, and so I started that book with them. So they
Nice.
had it they'll have it from the beginning, hopefully till the end. So that'll be kind of fun to do that with them. And then the lady Terry Moore, who did the little vignettes in Whispering Through Water,
Yeah.
or pictures. I can pull it back there if you want me to. She and I are hoping to pitch a project together. So fingers crossed it works. It's
Ah,
nothing to do with yoga. It is social emotional learning picture book, but hoping we'll see
well,
how
all
that
that sounds
goes.
exciting.
Yeah. So, but I really don't want to do marketing, but I know I have to do
Right.
it. That is not fun. But all this
Yeah.
other stuff is more fun.
If I had all the money, that is one thing I would do is hire a marketer.
Yeah, that would be great.
Just do it all for me.
Yeah. Like, and even then, you're like, I don't know. It feels like some of it, I think some of it is luck. You got to get the
Right.
right thing in front of the right person,
Yeah,
and um, some
I
of it is
agree.
up to fate. So
Yeah.
fate works in my direction at some point. So,
All right. So, any advice you'd like to share with new writers?
um, one thing is not because I think there's a danger with social media is not to compare yourself with how much or how little you are doing compared to somebody else.
Mhm.
And if you start those feelings, you need to shut it off. Just shut off the social media, take a break from it. Because social media, I mean, working mental health definitely affect. We talk about how it affects teens. We don't
Yeah,
talk about how it affects adults, and
it does.
it does us too. So
Mhm.
just cut it off if it's causing you, feeling bad about yourself. It's not worth it. Um,
Right.
I definitely say get a critique group that you can meet face to face if possible. Um, I'm like a big advocate for SCBWI. If remember, the Carolinas chapter is the best, and we tell that to everybody. But if you can get a critique group, it, for me, it just helps me keep moving. And they're very encouraging people, but also I trust their judgment too. They're not. I mean, they're all people who are experienced writers. They've been working on this a while, so and I trust their. And they thought, you know what, this doesn't really work. That I believe them. I say so. I would say do that too. Um, and the other thing is read a lot of different genres,
Yeah.
whatever you can get your hands on. I think picture books are, even if you read YA, I think quality picture books, because you have to do so much with less than 1,000 words
Mhm.
that it really teaches you something about plot and story, you know.
Yes.
So read less, even if it's picture books. So yeah, those are my
Great advice.
so,
Okay, so what's something you can't live without and why?
oh. something, anything.
Yes.
Um, like humans or animals.
Just
I mean, like
anything.
I'd say my family, but that's,
Sure.
but I don't think,
Your yoga.
yeah, I can't live without that. I think I can't live without my plants, a plant
Yep.
in my life
Aw,
sometimes. So
I love that. That's a great answer.
I think I need them. So, I mean, anytime my son, he's 5, if he says, "Mom, let's go in the garden," I say, "Okay, we're going." So,
Aw,
I think, yeah, any kind of, I've got to be growing something or attempt to be.
I love that answer. No one's ever said that before. That's great. Okay, so if you could be any animal, what would you choose and why?
I'd probably be one of my cats here because they've got the life.
Oh, okay.
Um, I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's probably. I've always been fascinated with owls. I love owls, and I think it'd be cool to be one.
Oh,
They
love
can turn their
owls.
head all the way around.
Yeah,
Night's my favorite time. I guess cats are nocturnal too. Um, so yeah, maybe that.
that's great answer too. I love it. And they can fly. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, flying
they've
would
got
be
all the things.
fantastic. All right. Well, this has been so much fun, Becca. Can you tell everyone where they can find you on your socials?
Sure. So you go to Instagram, it's Rebecca W. Wheeler _ author. And there you can be connected to my webpage, which is easy. It's RebeccaWWheeler.com. And then a little plug for Flyleaf Books is my local independent bookstore in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They have all, you can order signed copies of all my books from them. It's all also linked on my webpage and on Instagram. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been great. And, I wish you so much success with everything that you're working on. This has been great. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's good to talk to you in person and not just as a
Yeah.
little square.
Right.
Look at you.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.